Chapter 7 Cheddar and Limburger. Tiger Lily spent the week building a canoe with Thorn. The Maple Scouts had made one out of birch bark for a badge a few months before, so Thorn knew what to do. First, they found some birch bark. Thorn showed Tiger Lily how to fold it up so that it was a shape like a canoe. Then they used pine needles to sew the front and the back edges together. Tiger Lily was suddenly glad that Violet had taught her how to sew. Who knew that sewing would actually come in handy. When the canoe was finished, they found some sticks. Thorn showed Tiger Lily how to carve them into paddles. Finally, they were ready to put the canoe in the water. On the morning of the Mouse Scouts meeting, Tiger Lily and Thorn met at the stream. They dragged their canoe to the edge of the water. Tiger Lily got in first and steadied the canoe with her paddle. Then Thorn pushed the canoe away from the bank and jumped in. The current was so strong, and they glided quickly down the stream. Tiger Lily loved the feeling of the wind on her ears. Then she saw a group of rocks up ahead. She tried to steer with her paddle, but they were moving too fast. They were going to crash. There was only one thing to do. "Abandon ship!" she shouted. Tiger Lily and Thorn jumped out of the canoe into the water. Then they swam as hard as they could for the edge of the stream. They pulled themselves onto the bank just in time to watch the canoe bounce through the rocks. Tiger Lily's heart sank. They had worked so hard on the canoe. If Violet were here, she would be in tears. Tiger Lily felt close to tears herself. She blinked and looked at Thorn. "Don't worry," he said. "We can always make another one." Tiger Lily smiled and stretched out in the dry sun. It was nice being friends with a Maple Scout. Tiger Lily's thoughts turned to the Acorn Scouts. Some friends they were. She had hardly seen them since the last meeting. Hyacinth and Petunia had ignored her in the park. Junebug and Cricket had walked the other way when they saw her coming. And she hadn't seen Violet for a few days. Tiger Lily felt a lump in her throat. Then she felt a little mad. They were supposed to be working on the Make Friends badge together, but they weren't much together in sight. "I'm glad you're coming to our Mouse Scout meeting today," Tiger Lily said to Thorn. "You might be my only friend there." Thorn laughed. "The Maple Scouts aren't happy about it either," he said, "but they'll get over it." He took a piece of cheese from his backpack and handed it to Tiger Lily. "Holy moly, gorgonzoli," Tiger Lily said. Thorn gave her a funny look. "It's called gorgonzola," he said. "I know," Tiger Lily said, "but it didn't fit my rhyme." Tiger Lily was surprised. She never had to explain cheese rhymes to Violet. "That's silly," said Thorn. "Yeah, I guess you're right," said Tiger Lily. But she didn't think it was silly at all. She had a sharp pang of missing Violet. Thorn interrupted Tiger Lily's thoughts. "Race you up that tree," he said, and jumped up. Tiger Lily forgot about Violet and ran after Thorn. They raced neck and neck to the tree, then climbed up to the very top. Thorn jumped across to a branch on the next tree. Tiger Lily was standing right behind him, and then bounced Thorn. And the bounce made Thorn jump and almost slip. She grabbed onto a branch and held tight while she caught her breath. She thought again about Violet. Tiger Lily had been so proud of her the day they played on the mini blinds. Violet had been fearless. Suddenly, it seemed important to see Violet before the Mouse Scout meeting. Tiger Lily wanted to tell her that Maple Scouts were okay, but most of all, she wanted to tell Violet that she was still her best friend. She only hoped that Violet felt the same way. Tiger Lily jumped down from the branch, then scrambled down the tree trunk to the ground. She looked back up to the treetop where Thorn was still playing. "Hey, Thorn, I've got to go," she called. "I'll see you at the meeting." Mouse Scout Handbook. Mouse Scout Friendships Lost and Found. Through the Mouse Scouts, many lifelong friendships have formed, but it is not always smooth sailing. Even best friends can hit rough seas and stormy weathers, as these stories will illustrate. Trillium and Bud. Alder's son, Bud, was one of the first Maple Scouts. Because the Maple Scouts were still catching on, they often had joint meetings with Acorn Scouts. It was at one of those meetings that Bud met Daisy's daughter, Trillium. The two were inseparable. As often happens with young friends, though, they went their separate ways when Trillium graduated from Sunflower Scouts and Bud from the Goldenrods. Trillium never forgot her love for scouting, and after graduating from Mouse University, she became an Acorn Scout leader. One of her first activities was a joint meeting with the Maple Scouts. Trillium was surprised to find the Maple Scout leader was none other than her old friend Bud. They quickly rekindled their friendship, which before long turned to love. Azalea and Blossom had been best friends ever since Buttercups. They shared a love of ballet and were excited when it was finally time to work on a dance badge. That excitement soon turned to heartbreak, at least for Azalea. Blossom was chosen for the lead in the pageant, while Azalea was asked to be a stagehand. Blossom was so thrilled to be the star that she had little time for Azalea, and she failed to see that Azalea's feelings were hurt. The day before the performance, Blossom twisted her ankle while running from a cat. She would be unable to perform. Azalea offered to stand in for Blossom. She performed beautifully, and even Blossom had to admit that Azalea had been perfect. At the end of the performance, Azalea called Blossom up to the stage, and they both took a bow. Holly and Jasmine never liked each other. They had very different personalities and couldn't see eye to eye. But in a twist of fate, the two mice were separated from their troop during a hike. There was a sudden snowstorm, and they needed to find shelter. Holly discovered an abandoned chipmunk hole, and Jasmine reluctantly followed her. While they waited out the storm, their coldness towards each other gradually thawed. Holly was surprised to learn that Jasmine was actually very shy. Jasmine was surprised by Holly's plucky sense of humor. By the time the storm had ended and the scouts were reunited with their troop, they had become the best of friends.